Okay. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm Diane Hoffman, professor and director of the Law and Healthcare program here at the University of Maryland Carey School of Law. We're very excited at the great turnout for this first Rothenberg Healthcare Law and Policy Speaker Series event of 2024. I know you're all very much looking forward to hearing from today's distinguished speaker, Dr. Vardit Ravitsky. First, though, I want to briefly explain the history and purpose of our virtual series as we kick off another year of excellent speakers and issues. The Rothenberg Healthcare Law and Policy Speaker Series grew out of a desire to continue to bring excellent scholarly topics to our health law community when we transitioned to a virtual format in 2020 due to COVID, and has since become a wonderful way for our health law faculty, students, alumni, and the broader community to connect and learn together virtually. The series was established with generous funding from the Karen Rothenberg and Jeffrey Seltzer Law and Healthcare Program Endowment. Professor Rothenberg was a former dean of the law school, as well as the founder and former director of our law and healthcare program. As you can tell from today's topic, the series focuses on current issues in healthcare law and policy. Past year's themes have included both health inequities, exacerbated by the COVID-19 crisis, genetics, and reproductive health care. This year, we focused on issues around artificial intelligence, or AI, in healthcare. Our fall speakers were Glenn Cohen of Harvard Law School, who started the year's series in September with an overview of the regulatory and ethical challenges in medical AI. In November, we welcomed Nita Farahani from Duke University Law School, who presented on the privacy concerns with AI in healthcare. And today we turn to the ethical implications of AI and are lucky enough to have one of the leading experts in this area speaking. Dr. Vardit Ravitsky is president of the Hastings Center, a nonpartisan nonprofit research institute created from multiple disciplines, including philosophy, law, political science, and education. And it is the oldest independent institute of its kind in the world. The center helps frame and navigate critical social and ethical issues in health, science, and technology through research, publications, and public engagement. Dr. Ravitsky is a leading bioethicist whose career has focused on the ethical, legal, and social implications of emerging technologies. She is also an internationally respected public scholar, a professor of bioethics at the University of Montreal, and a senior lecturer at Harvard Medical School. She's actively involved with the Canadian Institutes of Health Research and is a co-principal investigator on two recent projects awarded through the U.S. National Institutes of Health's Bridge to Artificial Intelligence program, which she may tell us more about this afternoon. Ravitsky has published over 200 articles and commentaries, has given over 300 talks worldwide, and is a regular contributor to the media on bioethical issues. Today, Dr. Ravitsky's talk will be Constructing an Ethics Framework for AI in Biomedical Research. Welcome, Dr. Ravitsky.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to join you today and to hear about the previous talks that were given by people who are friends and colleagues. And I hope to continue to inform you and have a wonderful, lovely, lively discussion that will emerge from the points that I will make. So I chose to focus on, let me share my slides. The way that we integrate bioethical considerations into biomedical research that is based on AI. So, you know, AI is now absolutely everywhere. We all saw the executive order that was published recently. Guidelines are published daily. The governance structures are struggling to keep up with the technological pace of innovation. So in that context, it's not a surprise that AI is being integrated into health very quickly, into healthcare, into the management of healthcare institutions, and also into biomedical research. I want to start with just a few very high-level points about where we see bioethical concerns related to the integration of AI tools in health. And I divided these to individual level concerns and systemic level concerns, and then we'll dive into biomedical research. So think of yourself as a patient going for a diagnostic test. Do you think that you have a right to know that AI read your mammography, your X-ray, your MRI? Should the involvement of AI in your care be a part of informed consent going forward? So that's that entire cluster of issues related to our right to know that we are dealing with AI is one main topic that keeps ethicists awake at night these days. Another big issue is what we call the black box concern. Many of the, well, all the algorithms involved potentially in care and in health research are not easily understood unless you developed them yourself, are not easily understood by the public and by patients. So would that become the fact that we're kind of the decisions are being made for us based on processes that we don't understand? Would that become a source of lack of trust and slower uptake of these technologies? So that brings up the notion of explainability. Do we want AI tools that we can understand, that can be explained to us, that are transparent to us in order to increase trust and uptake? But what if that stands in tension with the reliability of the tool? What if in order to be really effective, it should remain a black box? So that's an interesting tension we find in the literature. And of course, privacy protections. Will AI create more risk of re-identifying even anonymized health data? Will it allow triangulation of data from multiple sources? And we know that HIPAA, I'm talking to a bunch of legal experts, we know that HIPAA has limits in the context of AI generated tools. So these are a bunch of concerns that we see in the literature. There are also concerns at the systemic level, and this will lead into my main topic today, which is how we address these concerns in biomedical research. So first of all, liability for AI-based medical harm. What if, based on AI tools, your care was not optimal? Who is going to be responsible and accountable for such harms? And this will be very relevant in the first era of integration of AI in health, where we're constantly improving the quality of these tools, and sometimes they are still in an experimental stage. So would your individual care provider be liable? Will it be the organization, for example, the hospital? Would there be a system of systemic compensation for such harms, such as in the case of vaccines? All this remains to be seen. The pace of development, as I mentioned, is a huge challenge for research governance and implementation. Practically daily or weekly, we see substantial progress. And so any attempt to create new norms at the legal level, the regulatory level, or even bioethical norms needs to sort of keep up with this pace of innovation, which is a huge challenge. And then there's the topic we're all concerned with of algorithmic bias. The fact that to develop all these tools that would have enormous benefits for us, we need data sets to train the algorithms, and those usually have limited diversity, which means that if we develop the tools on a data that has been overrepresenting certain populations, the tools that will be generated will also benefit those populations, and this will create disadvantages for other populations that were underrepresented. So in the context of this notion of concern about bias and the limited diversity that we see everywhere, I wanted to focus today on an example, not keep talking at this abstract level of ethical concerns, but rather use a case study, the NIH project that Diane mentioned, in order to show you how these issues play out in one specific context and what we're trying to do to address them. And this is the NIH Bridge to AI program, an entire initiative that started from the recognition, the insight of the NIH that without high quality, standardized, diverse data sets to train AI on and to use AI for research, the outcomes of the research will be inappropriate, inadequate. So the NIH decided to take this very innovative approach and fund a project that does not aim only to develop tools, diagnostics, interventions, but to develop the data sets required to do biomedical research with AI. So this is our website. I invite you to visit if this is of interest, bridge2ai.org. And the notion is to create those data sets while emphasizing ethical best practices and promoting diversity in the teams, in the data, but also in the teams. So you can see we're looking for to standardize data attributes, to develop automated tools that will allow to really fast-pace this kind of research, to create cross-training materials and develop the workforce that can do biomedical research with AI, and to disseminate our products and best practices broadly. The approach the NIH took was to run a competition to ask the research community, what types of data do you think we can use to test this, to see how to develop best practices for collecting data that would be AI ready in research. The emphasis in this project is on not just on the data collection, but on the ethics. The data collected should be accurate, reliable, and ethically sourced, which means a whole bunch of things that we'll get to. There's also emphasis on the people, the notion that to develop non-biased AI tools, we need not just the data to be diverse, but the teams that work with the data. That we need to train diverse professional groups to work on all aspects of this, because only with diversity in the workforce, the scientists, the ethicists, the patients that participate, we will be able to really cover the grounds and not have blind spots. So it's not just about the bias in the data, it's the bias in us as well and how we look at the data. For many applications, the NIH chose 4 data generation projects. So you can imagine that a lot of scientists would want to have these large, standardized, ethically sourced data sets to work on. And the NIH said, well, okay, we can't start by doing everything. We can't cover every type of data that would be useful to science. So let's pick 4 flagship types of data, see how it's done, develop the tools, develop the best practices, and then that would be the outcome of this project. Not just 4 data sets, but the knowledge of how to generate them in the future. The 4 that were selected were voice, as a data set of voice samples. A second project looks at diabetes, another one in critical care, and one in genomics. I would like to now zoom into the voice project because, first of all, it's very innovative and less familiar to the general public. Second of all, voice raises very unique sets of ethical challenges when it comes to the use of AI and the use of voice as a biomarker, and also because I am co-lead of the bioethics work on this project, so I can speak intimately about it. Our project is called Voice as a Biomarker of Health, Building an Ethically Sourced Bioacoustic Database to Understand Disease Like Never Before. And if it sounds dramatic, it's because it is. We are looking at voice as a biomarker of health, which means that we are going to show that voice recordings, that a patient, just by sharing their voice with their care provider, can get many diagnostic and prognostic and follow-up benefits, and also that there are benefits to using voice for drug development and preventive interventions. This is our team. And as you can see, it's big and diverse. Under each of the people that you see on the screen, there's a team of trainees and students and junior colleagues. So we're talking about a team of dozens of people. Now multiply that by 4, because we have 4 projects, and you can only imagine the complexity of this project. There are hundreds of scientists based in dozens of institutions generating those 4 data sets that are meant to promote and propel the use of AI and sort of create the groundwork for the next generation biomedical research. Just the communication between us is almost a full-time job. And because the NIH has never done this before, and it's not a regular kind of project, it's funding us year to year based on what we're learning. So we're changing best practices midway. Some have compared it to building a plane in the air. Sometimes it feels like that, but it's really meant to be nimble, responsive, and not get stuck on, we have done this way before, so we're going to replicate, but rather constantly reinvent itself and find ways to learn in real time how to best generate those data sets and how to best use AI on each of those types of information. So now I'm going to zoom into the voice project even further and say a few words about why voice is such a promising type of data. I love this quote. Many of the slides I'll be using were generated by our team, so I want to give credit to those who created them, not all mine. And I love this quote: "The human voice is the most beautiful instrument of all, but the most difficult to play." Think about yourselves if you're teachers or professors and you need your voice for your work. Think about singers. Most of us use voice every day, either just to communicate or as a part of our work. But think about what happens when our voice is limited, our capacity to express ourselves vocally is limited. What a huge impact that has on us. Human voice also carries identity, love, emotions. This is a picture of the twins of our PI, the lead of our project, that completely by chance had twins a few years ago. And she said from early on, I could identify which one is crying, because to me as a mom, their voices were completely different. She also reminds us how often, think about getting a phone call from your mom and you say, oh, what's wrong? There's something very intuitive about how voice communicates well-being. It can be either we think somebody is sick or somebody's depressed or somebody just has a bad mood. But we intuitively, as non-experts, can pick up on so much by hearing somebody that we know well speak. And this is what voice experts do clinically. So they look at, the very simple act that I'm now performing, speaking to you, involves all of these sub-activities that voice experts can deconstruct and base diagnosis on them. Yael, our PI, who is a voice expert, says that as soon as the conversation with the patient starts, she can tell what their main health concern is at that time. So that's mind-blowing. But it's based on her individual expertise built over years of listening to patients. How many of you listening to me now have seen a voice specialist in your life? Probably very few, if anyone at all. It's a very rare specialty. And the point of using AI to develop these tools is to make it accessible broadly to the general public, even those who are not close to a big clinical center, really make this another diagnostic tool that is available very, very broadly. Voice as a biomarker of health has a huge commercial potential. Since we started our project, we have been contacted by many startups that look at voice as a biomarker for a specific disease. So my startup is looking at schizophrenia. My startup is looking at ALS. Many commercial entities are trying to already use AI to develop these techniques. You can see it already in the media. But interestingly, it goes beyond health, and I don't want to scare anybody, but the notion of using AI to generate fake voice, this is already very advanced. You know, some of you, maybe when you call your bank, you're already identified by your voice as a way to give you access to your account. Now imagine what happens when AI can imitate your voice and create a fake you. So this is a podcast where the two people were conversing, but none of them was really there. Their voice were just this was like a deep fake generated voice that allowed an actual conversation to occur. So this is very scary and requires regulation, of course. But as I said, because the technology outpaces the regulation, there are constant threats in this context. Back to a biomarker of health, we're going to look at multiple categories where voice plays a role, a potential role, in types of diseases. So we're going to look at mood disorders, obviously respiratory diseases, voice disorders, neurological disorders, sleep disorders. Why is industry so invested in this? And this is beginning to approach the bioethical issues. Voice could be one of the cheapest, lowest resource biomarkers. What we're doing in this project is develop an app that patients can use on their phone at home to record themselves and send the recording to their healthcare provider. So non-invasive. Compare this to genetic testing or to even blood work or an X-ray. It's so simple, it's so inexpensive that it could become a significant public health tool. It could also be used to monitor drug development. So you could have research participants at home sending you voice samples throughout a trial. It can monitor the progression of chronic disease. It can allow telehealth. Mental health services are already using voice as a biomarker based on AI support. So the potential here is immense. And at the same time, here's a collection of studies.
You went on mute.
Sorry, is it okay now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Don't know how that happened. What we're hearing from our colleagues, the voice specialists, is that all they can offer at this time to their patients is just very primitive pen and paper tracking of the changes that they perceive in their voice. And that is so far away than the promise that AI carries to generate these tools. So why is progress slow? What does our project hope to do? And then I will zoom into the bioethical issues. Well, the work on this is happening in silos. Those who worry about laryngeal disorders work separately than those who worry about neurological disorders. We are going to look at all disease categories at the same time based on one standardized data set. So that has great promise. There are also challenges because the current data sets are small, they're not diverse. There are concerns about voice as an identifier that slows down research. We have lack of standards for collecting the voice samples. Think about the impact of language and accent on the ability to standardize such data sets. So all of these difficulties and challenges create this shackle that slows down the innovation in a field that could really revolutionize care. And so what we're trying to do through this project is build an ethically sourced, diverse, and ready for AI use database of 30,000 human voices that are linked to health information from those 5 categories of diseases. We're looking at vocal, I'm going to speed up to get to the bioethical issues. We're looking at vocal pathologies, neurological conditions like Parkinson's or ALS, moods and psychiatric disorders, respiratory disorders like pneumonia, pediatric diseases, even autism could potentially be diagnosed early based on voice. So the potential, the clinical potential is immense. And to get there, we need biomedical research powered by AI to develop all of these tools and interventions. How are we different than other projects that have already started? Large scale, ethically sourced. We're really focused on developing standards for this data collection. We want, at the same time that we're collecting the samples and doing the research to develop tools, we want to develop ethical guidelines for this entire pipeline of data collection, research, and then implementations of our findings, guidelines that will make sure we're responding to all these concerns that I showed you in the beginning. And we're very focused on disseminating knowledge. We are not a commercial entity. We're funded by the NIH, and therefore it's all about sharing everything that we create with the broad scientific community and with the public without any commercial interests. So that makes us different. Now, I want to keep enough time for discussion, so let me go with you quickly through examples of bioethical issues that we're facing, that we're seeing emerge from this attempt to create the ecosystem to advance voice as a biomarker. And the first one goes back to, obviously, diversity and bias. If you collect voice samples from only certain populations, only certain races, only certain age groups, not to mention accents, the algorithms that you develop for diagnosis, for follow-up, will be completely biased in favor of the population from which you got your samples. So we have a long history of overrepresenting white populations, socioeconomically advantaged populations. There's a huge concern that AI could exacerbate existing health gaps if we don't pay great attention to diversity in order to prevent bias. We're already seeing the impact of bias in the integration of AI in healthcare. Our projects are meant to really eliminate such bias through particular attention to diversity. Privacy and threats to confidentiality are present throughout the different uses of AI in health, but here I think they are exacerbated because it's collecting voice is so cost-effective, non-invasive, easy, and safe, as I said, so it can be done in any setting. Now think about what I'm doing now. I'm speaking to you and my voice is being recorded. It's going to be out there. If in 5 years, just my voice can be used for early diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's, for example, somebody could use potentially this recording of my voice. We're leaving our voices everywhere. Think about all the text messages and the videos and the talks that we're going online. We're leaving our voices everywhere. What if that becomes a real reliable diagnostic tools? And all of a sudden, you know, we used to think about this in the context of DNA. We leave our DNA behind to make it so available and it could be used to harm us in the future. What if this happens with voice? How do we protect privacy? Now, at least when I'm giving you this talk now, my voice is not linked to my health data. You don't know my DNA, you don't know my current blood pressure or my family history. The data that we're collecting, the voice samples we're collecting are linked. So the risk, and we need to do that, we need to link them to extensive health data in order to do the research. So how do we protect individuals and privacy in this context when AI can really empower us to triangulate sources and to re-identify even samples that were anonymized? data sharing and potential commercial use. We are creating this flagship, wonderful data set that will propel biomedical research. But what if Google wants to collaborate with us? What if somebody wants to buy this data set that we're creating? Are we open to such collaborations and to public-private partnerships or not? They could exacerbate all the risks that I'm mentioning, but they also have great potential to speed up and allow even more effective innovation. So we need ethical guidelines about such partnerships. Back to the issue of explainability versus reliability. If we are now using our great data set to speed up innovation in this area, do we want to insist on explainability so that future patients will be able to understand why we think that their voice is telling us that they're at high risk of a certain disease? Or do we let go of explainability and just focus on reliability, on effective tools, knowing that patients will not be able to understand how we got there? And in many cases, clinicians will not be able to understand how we got there, but they will know that they're providing their patients with the best standard of care. How do we balance these competing values? We're thinking deeply about that and developing guidelines for that. And finally, if this is going to become the very powerful tool that we think it will, and not just voice, also the application in other areas of biomedical research, we need really good science communication to build trust. This could revolutionize care, and it already is in imaging, for example. We're already seeing it hitting the ground. We already see patients say, I want AI to read my mammography. I don't trust my clinician as much as I trust AI. So if we want to maintain such trust, build such trust, and make sure that we actually reap the benefits of these powerful tools, we need excellent science communication to share with the public all of these concerns and to explain how they have been addressed. We need to do this without creating extra hype, without over-promising what AI can do. We did this in genomics at certain times, that we said, oh, around the corner is the next big thing. Then it didn't pan out, and it really hurt public trust. So we need to find that sweet spot between communicating the great benefits, not overhyping what AI can do, and building and maintaining trust. So how do we do all this? This is our ethics team as a part of the Voice Project. And don't be scared by this slide. I'm just using it because it's sort of the visual representation of what we're doing over 4 years. We're starting with literature reviews, stakeholder survey, to just get a sense of what people care about in the literature from an ethical perspective in the literature, and those who are using and developing these technologies. And then we're creating a conceptual framework, sort of a draft governance approach to all of these issues. At the second stage, which is the 3 circles in the middle, we're using interviews, Delphi, to gather even more deeper information in order to refine this framework. And then we're going to use the very end of the project to implement it, validate it, test our solutions on real AI developers, real clinicians, real patients who are using these tools to further refine them. And all of this is happening openly, transparently, with data sharing along the way. So I'm ending with this kind of slide that we developed that is full of promise and excitement. But of course, to do this right, we need to pay this very, very deep attention to all the ethical challenges along the way. And I'm thanking you for your attention and eager to hear your questions and comments.
Thank you, Dr. Ravitsky, so much. What a fascinating topic, really cutting edge, and really a great example to think about the ethical and some of the legal issues that may come up with this new technology. I'm already thinking about direct-to-consumer voice testing companies that will likely emerge, and how FDA might regulate them.
They're already there, Diane.
Okay.
They're totally out there as we speak.
Wow. So If others have questions, if you can put them in the chat, we'll take what you have, any thoughts or questions that you have for Dr. Ravitsky. I'll start with one until some other people get into the queue, but I wonder how you think about in terms of sourcing the data and the voice samples and diversity, and are you going outside the United States, I guess, or do you remain in the United States?
So data collection happens in the US and Canada. We have Canadian partners. And initially we thought of limiting the participants to English speakers because of course we cannot cover all the languages around the globe. But because voice is so dependent on accent, the NIH recognized that and gave us additional funding to collect from Spanish speakers. So now we have 2 languages, which already presents huge challenges, of course. But as I said, the point is not so much to create the ultimate data set, it's to generate the tools that tell other researchers how to do it. So the notion is that based on our framework and our standards and our guidelines about how to collect the data and how to build the workforce, other teams in the future, in other countries, in other disciplines, will replicate what we're doing to generate other types of data, but that respond to these high standards. So it could be, a French group collecting voice, or anybody in the world collecting DNA. The point was really to create the tools to do this right, because currently it's being done not optimally. Diane, it's also an opportunity for me to talk about age. We're collecting from babies all the way to older individuals. Our voice, of course, changes with our age. Think about how sometimes you can identify on the phone how old a person is just by how they sound. So there's also the issue when we talk about diversity, we have to have representation from different age groups. Collecting cries from a baby is very different than collecting speech from somebody with early onset dementia, and we can hear blurred speech or difficulty in articulation. So the challenges are different, not just across languages, but also across age groups, which makes this even more complicated.
Great, thank you. Fascinating. So we're getting some questions, I see. So one listener asked, said, I'd like to hear more about the conflict between explainability and reliability. It doesn't seem like those have to be opposing goals.
Maybe in the future, in an ideal world, the algorithms will be simplified, or the public will be so educated in this area. Karen just was telling us as we were logging on that she told a neighbor that she's going to talk about AI, and the neighbor said, "What's artificial intelligence?" I think in a few years from now, there will be nobody in the world who will ask this question, but to what degree people will understand how this works, this could take many years. The issue is that the more you are limiting algorithmic development to make sure it's simple enough to explain, the more you could be limiting the effectiveness of the outcome. I'm not an AI developer, so I cannot speak to the technological aspects of this. I'm just repeating what's explained to me, but that shows you I am working on a team that develops something that I can't understand myself. And then I'm supposed to train clinicians to offer this to their patients. When I don't understand it, they don't understand it, their patients won't understand it, but we're all told that, or we're shown the outcomes. We're just shown that when let's take reading an X-ray, we can compare the diagnostic outcomes of an algorithm reading X-rays to experienced radiologists and see that AI is performing better, that it picks up things that the human eye cannot, even based on decades of experience, and therefore it can catch cancer earlier. And then you tell a patient, so what do you prefer? an algorithm telling you what we saw on your x-ray without us being able to tell you how it happened. Trust us, it's better. Or a clinician saying, I see this here, based on my experience, this is associated with that, and something much more intuitive, much more interpretable, but that could be less effective. I think the jury's out on what patients will really, really care about. Maybe it's going to be a very personal decision. Some of us just don't trust machines and we want to talk to a human being and we want to hear how that human being, our clinician, thinks about this. And some of us will think, of course, machines are better. I can't wait to get rid of the human factor here so that I can trust what is offered to me. So part of it could be the personality of the patient. Some of it will definitely be how many problems this technology raises if it's implemented when it's premature. And we have lots of stories of harm. This will, of course, affect public trust and people may reject this. And a lot of it, I think, will depend on what is the use of AI. If it's to read an x-ray, that's one thing. If it's to take notes during a clinical encounter, notes that go into my healthcare record, taken by ChatGPT, for example, is that okay for me? What if it's robotics during surgery that we're already using? What if it's an algorithm deciding the dosage of my medication as my Parkinson's progresses? There are so many possible applications here that maybe the preference for explainability, reliability, human factor will depend on what is the context of using AI, and we will need different guidelines for each of these uses. So as you can tell, as bioethicists, we have our work set up for many years to come.
Definitely. Well, we have quite a few questions now. They keep on coming. This one was up twice, so I think I'll answer that one. How are you ensuring interoperability between the 4 project data sets so that you can apply AI tools to data integrated from these diversely generated data sets? Importantly, this will expose different ethical concerns.
So 2 answers. One is that the projects are standalone in the sense that what we do for genomics will be, of course, distinct from what we do for voice. Each one of these is supposed to not just collect a different type of data, but also generate different types of insights and understandings and then tools. So in that sense, they're standalone. Where it cuts across is at that level of governance and best practices. So when we say ethically sourced data, what do we mean? We mean one thing across the entire initiative, and then it will be operationalized differently based on that. So if when we say diversity, we mean X, then any type of data should respond to that standard of diversity, etc. We are actually approaching a very critical and exciting stage in year 2 of the project, where we will be releasing data for the first time, all 4 of us together. The NIH called it the Data Jamboree. I think they wanted it to sound exciting. Each team, we're all getting together in person, and each team is presenting the data that it was able to generate up to this point, share the challenges, share the ethical complexities, and we as the bioethics team, are supposed to show how we're beginning to address these. It's anything from threats to privacy to commercial entities approaching us already wanting to collaborate, to layers of granularity of the data and how far we should go. It's from the very technical to the legal, to the commercial, to the ethical. We're just going to sit with all this data that is still partial and kind of early days, and see what we can learn at this point. And that happens across, and that will have an interoperability concern for sure.
I guess following up for the research that's going to be done on this, one participant asked about whether participants would have the right to know that it's an AI study, even if it's perceived as minimal risk, and whether it could be labeled as a greater than minimal risk study.
Absolutely. So first of all, participants know everything. It's a part of the informed consent. They know exactly why we're collecting, what will be done with it. They understand the objectives of the study. Where I'm hesitating is where our team is struggling, because the objective of the study is to generate a data set, not a specific intervention. So we cannot tell participants what their sample will be used for in the future. What we can tell them is that we're doing our absolute best to protect their privacy, to develop responsible governance, and to do this for good purposes. But what diseases will have breakthroughs that might then come back to potentially harm them because of an identified sample that they put out there? Well, by the way, we keep saying that what we generate is open source, but that does not mean that we're putting people's samples out in the public domain. Oh my gosh, that would be a terrible thing to do. What it means is that once our data set is ready and the NIH sort of puts a stamp of approval on it and says, this is gold standard data for AI, the researchers from all over the world will be able to apply for permission, for a license to use it for their own studies. So we're foreseeing hundreds of research teams using this data in the future for conditions and innovations that we can't even think about now. So when we get informed consent from a patient to take their sample, put it into the data set, we'll tell them it will be anonymized, we'll do our best to protect your identity, but we don't know what will be done with this sample, either within our project or future projects that will have access to this data. So I don't think it's minimal risk. I think the risks are real, they have to be communicated, and research participants take many risks to help future generations and to help generalizable knowledge, and this is one of those cases. There are definitely risks associated when you don't know exactly what will happen with the outcomes of your research.
Here's another, I think, really interesting question. Like in the Human Genome Project and even the Microbiome Project, the effort was to kind of determine if there's a healthy or core genome or microbiome. If somebody's asking, is there such a thing as a standard healthy voice per identifier?
What a great question. Wow. I talked about voice and identity, voice and emotions, but what is a standard voice? That is so interesting, because just to think about gender and about age and about race, and you realize that this notion of a standard voice doesn't even make a lot of sense. But I think what we're looking at is deviations that are indicators of disease.
Yeah.
So again, think about somebody who's with pneumonia, who has hoarse voice and is coughing. You can tell something's wrong. Early dementia, you can tell. So I think what these algorithms are going to detect systemically is those deviations from a spectrum of healthy voices, not from a sort of standard human voice. And this would have to be sensitive to all these diverse factors.
Here's another one just about what is the process for creating ethical guidelines for AI studies? And what can we do to prepare and consider these guidelines and policies? So
That is exactly at the heart of what our project, our ethics module within the project does. So we call it an inquiry-based investigation, which means that we're not showing up with, oh, these have been the bioethics concerns in genomics, and these have been the concerns in neurology, and now we're just going to take the same sets of concerns and extrapolate onto working with AI. We're in listening mode. So yes, we looked at the literature to see what categories of concerns or what types of challenges bioethics has been struggling with. And if you think about privacy, we have decades of literature on privacy, right? But we are then going to all the relevant stakeholders, and that can be, again, basic scientists, the developers of algorithms, those who write software, the clinicians who might use it, the patients who might benefit from it, the public at large, we're going to basically those who would have a stake in this and asking them, what bothers you? What worries you? What do you see as a concern from your perspective? Your view on this revolution is very unique. What keeps you up at night? Do you have possible solutions to these worries? So through surveys, interviews, workshops, the Delphi method, we're collecting data, data about people's concerns. These can be psychological concerns, legal concerns, any type. So we're now in this phase of empirically collecting perspectives and views, and then we're going to distill all this into a new set of concerns that are particular to the use of AI in biomedical research. And based on that, we're going to develop our governance framework gradually to respond in an optimal way to each of these concerns while still engaging in conversation with all these stakeholders. So if we say, okay, privacy can be addressed by, I don't know, new legislation that addresses AI. I mean, the privacy appears in the executive order already, but let's say we say our proposal for tackling issues of privacy is X, we will then check, validate with the users to see if that actually responds to the concern. So it's going to be a long-term process, and even when we're done, to a degree, it will always be a work in progress because the technology will keep advancing, and then our responses will have to adapt.
Great, thank you. Here's another one. The uptake of this kind of technology will likely be greater in the private healthcare sector than the public healthcare sector. Regulatory controls might be slow to implement, and public opinion and/or concern would need to be addressed. But this may not be a challenge faced by private industry. Could this not lead to an even more exacerbated disparity in the quality and access of care available to those who need it?
If I wanted to be funny, I would just say the answer is yes, and then ask you to move to the next question. Because obviously the answer is yes. Because there's so much potential benefit here. Again, go back to the X-ray example, which I'm always giving because it's one of the most effective implementations we have to date. If we create a system where those with means have access to AI-based healthcare tools, and those with less means don't have that access yet, even though these tools have been validated and they're now safe and reliable, of course, this will greatly exacerbate health gaps. Because if done right and responsibly, these tools will allow earlier detection, preventive measures, better courses of treatment. They could become the foundation of personalized health that we're all dreaming of. So when the NIH said, oh, let's look at ethically sourced data, it wasn't just in order to speed up innovation and make sure we don't allow the creation of biased algorithms. It was also to say, let's create the standards for research that can generate tools that benefit everybody. So ethically sourced data doesn't stay at the level of data. It goes throughout the pipeline all the way to implementation. And the reason this is a public project is that it really has in mind, to a great degree, what will happen when the tools are there and who gets to benefit from them. There's no easy solution. It may be expensive at first and then the price reduced, just like we saw in genomics. It may be, as you said, or the person asking, more slowly adopted by sectors that are more regulated. We're going to see discrepancies between countries and jurisdictions, of course. But just like in everything else in health, we have to try and pay attention to what happens at the end of the pipeline and not allow commercial forces to dictate who benefits as much as we can.
Here's another question about public-private data sharing. So how is the licensed data set of 30,000 being protected? I assume it's not collected yet, but will be protected. Is the NIH going to be involved in, and I'm quoting, red teaming privately built models to prevent inadvertent release of training data?
It's a pretty technical question that doesn't fall squarely within my field of
Okay.
expertise, but
Okay.
we are, if you knew how many hours of meetings address this issue of privacy protection, because to go back to the voice project as an example, we have two stages. First of all, we're collecting these recordings in hospitals, in clinics. So research participants come to us, they consent, they understand, and then we are recording them. But then we're using AI to develop an app that could just be installed on any phone. And then in the second stage of the project, we will be collecting those voices, as we call it, in the wild. So patients can record them anywhere from where they are and share them. And then the issues of data release and hacking and privacy violations become very serious. And of course, we're dedicating a lot of attention to that, but many of the solutions are very technical. So yes, the NIH, again, we say ethically sourced data. Privacy protection is a major aspect of ethically sourced.
This is an interesting one. Maybe this might be the last one, but it's from a Canadian or someone in Canada who says we have a huge diverse population, many who speak beautiful ESL. How will your tools differentiate these cultural and ethnic challenges for EDI? I don't know if that's possible, but it's an interesting question.
So I already addressed the challenges of multi-dimensional diversity. It's not just phenotypic diversity as we usually think of it. It's also, as I said, ethnic background associated with accent, age, etc. So when you think about populations with disabilities, it depends what disability and how the disability affects speech. So if somebody's using, for example, sign language, it's not voice. So it is language, but it doesn't fall under the umbrella of what we are doing. If somebody cannot articulate at all because of is either a physiological or a mental condition, we are collecting what we can. It can be sounds produced, it can be cough, it can be heavy breathing. So when we say voice, we really incorporate almost every expression of voice, not necessarily speech and articulation the way you hear me now. But if it's not voice and it's still a language, it doesn't, it's not incorporated into this study because it's a different type of data.
Well, thank you so much for a wonderful and thought-provoking talk, and excellent for all of you who are here, all of you participants. I'm sorry we don't have time to answer all your questions, which keep coming into the chat, but we're so glad that you joined us, and we'll hope you'll join us again soon. Our final Rothenberg Healthcare Law and Policy Series, speaker series event for the academic year will be next month. On February 29th, we welcome back Professor Frank Pasquale. He was a former Maryland law professor who's now at Cornell Law and Cornell Tech, and he'll close out our AI-focused series with, this is the title of his talk, 3 Narratives of Mental Health Chatbots. And I hope you'll join us then. But thank you, everyone, and stay safe and warm. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ravitsky.
Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for the fascinating questions. Have a
Thank you
good
so
evening.
much. Thank you, Vardit, so much.
Thank you for the invitation, Karen. It's been a pleasure.